Right.
Actually, if we can start before the why, can you tell us something about yourselves? You know, just some personal background, because we're finding that's important. You know,
Okay. Well,
where people were coming from and how they became involved with New Brunswick.
yeah, it's in my bio, but basically I'm from the South Bronx. I went to the same high school that Colgate-Palmolive went to. He's just a little older than me.
Oh, okay.
Morris High, and so in leaving Morris High, I went to Wilberforce University in Ohio, got my BA, played basketball, had a scholarship, and then came back and actually did a small period with J&J as their first Negro researcher in personal products, and then was drafted into the Army, was stationed in Fort Dix, ended up at the First Army Medical Lab in 90 Church Street, so I spent all of my time in New York, being in the Army. Came back to New Brunswick in the Food Science Department at Rutgers for a master's program. At the same time, we had a child, and so we had babysitting problems, and so I dropped out.
And this was master's in plant?
No, master's in food science.
In food science.
And then I went to work for Colgate for about 2 years in research. And then with the, with the disturbances or rebellions in '67, I decided to change my career and came to then urban.
Where were you living at this time?
I was living in Piscataway. And decided to change my career and came to work at the then Urban League as a community social worker. In '70, I became then the president, chief executive officer.
Tell us a little bit about the Urban League.
The Urban League.
I mean, I know generally, but it would be good to get.
Well, the Urban League, when I came here, was primarily in the area of employment. We began to get more into social action when I became part of the staff, working with welfare rights and parent organizing and things like that. When I was first involved in the league, and as I became president, I got more involved in the planning because I got my master's at the same time that I became the chief exec. And then we got involved with some very controversial issues, the George Street Urban Renewal Project, which was very, very
popular. Tell us, because again, this is all...
Well, it was a kind of dormant urban renewal project, which was it's on Commercial Avenue. It's at the end of Commercial. It's 33 Commercial Avenue. We put together a team of a development team with architects and everything. And went before the Housing Authority, who was the redevelopment agency. And there was a lot of controversy because some public statements were made that we had the best plan, but all of a sudden, they picked someone else, and as a result, we had a lot of community activity, a lot of activity at City Hall, brought in people from HUD, and got very, very testy, I guess that's the best word, call for investigations and things like that. And so that was 71, 72, and then all this is documented in the home news. In 73, we actually filed, 74, we filed our suit against 23 municipalities, which was one thing. At the same time, we were involved in some other things around community and neighborhood development. So a lot of what the league was involved with prior to this whole New Brunswick Tomorrow process kind of set the stage for people coming together particularly as we things kind of elevated to not only City Hall, but who was on this council and who was president of the council, mayor of the council at the time, and that's two employees of J&J. So J&J became enthralled in this process. And it was at that time that there was a meeting with Phil Hoffman, and then later with Dick Sellars. By the way, are you talking to Dick Sellars?
We understand his health is not good. We had hoped to talk to him, but
Sorry to hear
apparently.
that,
Yeah, John Heldridge told us he didn't think if we were going to be able to.
yeah. Well, Dick was a key person.
Right.
Dick was.
Can you talk a little about that? Because especially since we can't speak directly with
Well,
Dick Sellars.
It actually was Dick Sellars who at the 1972 Urban League Convention that agreed that we should meet, he and I should meet and talk about how we could resolve some of the issues between basically J&J and some of the things that we've raised, we being the Urban League at that time. And we met here.
And those issues were around what?
Well, issues were the involvement of J&J personnel and some of the controversies that were going on around, particularly around low-income housing. And I think we met January 21st here in our office, and at that point we had a discussion about how we could work together. And one of the things I committed to was to look at models for revitalizing New Brunswick. At that time, we still had boarded up stores on George Street. And thanks to my colleagues, my Urban League colleagues, I was able to go to Baltimore to look at the blueprint. I was able to go to Boston to look at Copley Place, and I also went to Hartford, Connecticut, where I observed the Hartford process. And later I went back up and met with a large number of people from the Hartford process. Now, the Hartford process had a group which was an incorporated group, basically what is now New Brunswick Tomorrow, made up of community people from various agencies, basically a software part of the process. And they had a Devco, which is the Hartford Development Corporation. So later that year,
the people involved in Hartford, what, like insurance and other major corporations?
they were basically all white male, primarily from the insurance companies, on Devco. On the Hartford process, you had your Latinos, you had your blacks, and you had other whites and social service agencies. And what I recommended to Dick at that time is that we use that model, but with some modifications. One, that Devco had to have a presence of minorities and females on its board, and that there needed to be a cross-fertilization between the two groups. And as the American Cities Corporation report recommends, that there were three representatives, one from the public sector, one from the private profit sector, and one from the private non-profit sector. And that representation was John Heldridge, Richard Mulligan, then the mayor, and Roy Epps.
Who was Richard Mulligan?
He was the mayor.
Oh, okay.
He's out in, I think, in Jackson Hole.
Right.
And those three would serve on the New Brunswick Tomorrow and
Devco.
And the Devco.
Right.
And that would also help link those two entities better.
Yeah, and that was one of the problems in Hartford. There was no lines of communication between the two bodies.
And the
so,
development unit and their soft side.
right, that's correct. And
Were things being done in Hartford that sort of attracted your eye as far as?
well, I was more concerned with the structure. The Copley Place structure was really a situation where the developer was looking for community input but didn't have a structure to monitor it. The blueprint in Baltimore was really more of a neighborhood development. It wasn't. It was really a city-driven project. It wasn't that much community development, community involvement in it. I looked at something in Springfield, which was really a one-block development. Wasn't really an area-wide project. The Hartford process, which took in all of Hartford. Hartford is at least 2-3 times as big as New Brunswick, so it had a different kind of flavor to it, and I think one of the things it became unmanageable. Where New Brunswick, was manageable. I mean,
Because
very
just
small
the size,
right?
size
Right. And you didn't have as many actors. And when you get into large cities, you have a lot of actors. The more acreage you have, the more possibility you have from different stakeholders. So New Brunswick became a prime suspect for what was happening in Hartford.
I can imagine what the motivations were, but if you want, like J&J's motivation, in your perception was.
Well, my motivation was to protect the community. That's always been my motivation. My role on MBT right now is based upon what are you doing for the students, what are you doing in healthcare, and that's the role of this organization. So it's a different perspective that's taken to the table in the board meeting. Devco was one of those organizations that is very unique, and I will write on that. Because development is entirely different than sitting around a table talking about social issues.
Right. And how about J&J's motivation? What do you have a sense of their?
Oh, I thought J&J, besides their own self-interest of protecting their company and making things better for their company, and I think that those that I was involved with, had a real sense of their credo, that they really wanted to do something. Others, who didn't have any real connection, kind of went along with the program because they thought it would enhance J&J as from their own corporate image of having the town, improve. John Heldridge and Dick Sellars, were committed to this program, and that commitment was manifested in the board deciding to stay in New Brunswick. Because they had other options. They didn't have to stay here in New Brunswick. And that decision was probably the one critical decision that has allowed for New Brunswick to, in fact, grow to where it is right now.
The Rutgers in all of this process?
Well, I kind of cover all the way from Mason Gross up to where we are right now with Dick. So it's on and off. I guess some of my best experiences with Rutgers were with the faculty and students. I have not had that kind of commitment that I see. And this is me. I've been here long enough, 43 years. So Rutgers has been isolated for years. And it wasn't until we were able to get the bookstore on French Street that's coming across that trestle
Mm-hmm.
You know, did we see Rutgers really kind of move? You know, then we got the Blaustein School, and then other things started happening. We got the dorms downtown. But that period of getting them to move just to put a bookstore in the Farron-Deck, you know, that was a trying experience.
So they were kind of in New Brunswick, but not.
They've always been in New Brunswick. They're not Princeton. There's never been a Princeton environment here. It's been one side of the track and the other side of the track. And that's what was the reality up until actually the bookstore more significantly when we brought the Blaustein School.
Were there any presidents who were more actively involved than others?
Oh yeah, Mason Gross. No, Mason Gross was on our nonprofit development program. I mean, the Urban Leagues program.
Uh-huh.
You know, back in the 60s and 70s. You know, Mason was always there. And Dick McCormick. You know,
and Blaustein?
Well, Ed, yeah. Ed was a major partner. Ed was served on New Brunswick Tomorrow, and was always trying. He made the bookstore happen. There was a lot of resistance.
Was that Ed or was that Kenneth Wheeler?
Well, Ken played a role, but no, Ed was the president.
Right.
It's like,
Well, some people said he really didn't have involvement, and Kenneth did. So, did people have different perceptions?
Yeah,
of
well,
how active he
Ed was on MBT's board, so he was.
Uh-huh.
Ken was not. So Ed was confronted with this. Ed was brought to Devco from time to time. Ken was not. So people can call whatever they want. Ken might have been the implementer, but
Right.
from a policy point of view, as a policy maker, that's who I saw as being.
Since you mentioned the bookstore, and I can imagine what some of the issues were, can you just talk about that? I mean, I remember where the old bookstore was. It was right in the middle of the campus.
Mhm.
Okay. And just if you can just take us from there on.
Well, there was, when we were putting together the Farron-Deck, the question was raised about students being involved in the economic engine. My position is that students spend money. There were people on the board who thought that students don't spend that much money. It wasn't a major mover. And so there was some conflict, on how people perceived students. Then we had Rafferty's up on the hill. And the thought of having Rafferty's come over, that was another kind of, I call it coup, because it was the fact that they needed to expand and that we were able to get them, on Albany Street. That was, I thought, probably one of the best retail kind of activities that moves this process.
Trying to keep somewhat to the outline. So we're in the who's now. So we have J&J, we have New Brunswick, we have the Urban League, etc. Was the county at all?
Oh yeah, the county I thought played a significant role. Dave Cragill and Steve Capestro, who was here at that time, was ardent supporters. I mean, they were always there. Of course, they signed off on a lot of bonds, economic development agencies and things like that, and were key in getting the state involved in financing a number of projects.
the hospital then wasn't the hospital now, but were they on?
Well, the hospitals came on later. I mean, we had our problems initially with Middlesex Hospital, which is now Robert Johnson Hospital.
What problem?
Well, they had financial issues, like hospitals do. And I think with the foundation getting involved, Robert Johnson Foundation, to help save it, for a better word, and developing the Robert Johnson University Hospital process went a long ways in getting them involved. And of course, St. Peter's began to come on board. So the hospital became the second line development process, I think. The first was getting I&P in and doing the 317 George
Well, actually,
Street.
if we can talk about that, like now that we mentioned some of the actors, what were now some of these initial steps and what?
Well, the initial steps was, I think, was to bring I&P in to talk about, because J&J wanted to use I&P for their new headquarters once they made that decision. And so once I&P came in and did the 317 George Street, then we started working on Hyatt and got this grant, this UDAG grant, $6 million to kind of pump it up. Of course, there was the issues around the Hiram Street development down there, because you're putting the hotel down by Hiram Street, and so those are some historical issues that began to
The Hiram Street Market.
Right, Hiram Street Market area. But two historical churches, bordering it. A lot of the structures were in disrepair because of the landlords, owners just kind of basically walked away from the place. But out of that came Crossroads, when we were able to help Crossroads, we being the Civic League, or Urban League at the time, get Crossroads established, and took over the King Block building and started producing plays down there. So that became a blessing and a curse in a way, because they had to move them so that they could take over the area, and so we kind of moved into the Livingston Avenue piece. So, excuse me.
If we can maybe just spend a moment or two on the Hiram Market,
Oh, the Hiram Market had some significant historical significance. I thought I was probably in the minority because other people saw it differently. There were some elements down there. There was still a sense of small community in that area. And people felt that they were being pushed out.
you're talking about residents and
residents and some of the, we were just talking about one of the restaurants, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson that were down there. That was requested to leave. People had a sense of that neighborhood. When J&J did their structures, there was the Washington Street and some other streets that some of us, maybe I'm not as old as some others, really enjoyed that area. That was an area where it was part of the black community at one point. And as people moved, they moved away from the river, and other folks filled in the river area. It became prime land. Once it was determined that was prime land, and things were at risk. People were at risk.
Looking at Hiram Street from the historic, it was an historic resource. I mean, is something could have been done differently, or what is?
Oh yeah, I think it would have taken more money, of course. And all this comes down to money. What is economically feasible? Even the King Block building could have been kind of factored in if we really wanted to do it, but that wasn't what the majority of people wanted to do.
So you've spoken about, how you went out and looked at other models, and then, Hartford then influencing the NBT and the Devco model, and then some of the early projects, the hotel being an important one. You want to talk about some other, what were other projects and steps at this?
Well, we got
getting started.
Yeah, we got involved with neighborhoods. We did some neighborhood projects. We picked up the inventory of HUD, which was, when I say inventory, I'm talking about the abandoned housing units, which we felt were still salvageable. And we did some rehab there. People had to stay, had home ownership. In fact, after a year with one being online, I actually took one and rehabbed it and stayed in it for 20 years on Seaman Street.
And this was in which areas in New Brunswick?
This is all over New Brunswick, but primarily they were in central New Brunswick, off Livingston. There was some off Remsen Avenue. There were about maybe 10, 12 units. And Devco would do some of it, and then the owners would have to do sweat equity and doing the rest. We put some units up on Commercial Avenue, and did a number of units on Commercial Avenue. I was also chairman of the housing committee for Devco, so a lot of the housing that was done during that period was done, with the assistance of Paul of Talent. Paul was probably one of the best presidents that we had. He was very community-minded, and that, of course, was one of the issues that we had to always deal with, neighborhood versus downtown. The philosophy on the board was that you needed to do downtown so that you could have the resources to do the neighborhood. And my position is that the neighborhood is the one that gives you the tax abatements, because I've lived in New Brunswick since on and off. I came here in 1960 with my mom, but I moved back. I moved to Piscataway, then back to New Brunswick from '69 on. So I've been in New Brunswick since that time. I'm one of the few people who live in New Brunswick and pay taxes in New Brunswick that serve on the board.
I see.
And was the only one, when I was on Devco.
You started to mention something about the tax abatements.
Right.
Those are tax abatements for the commercial development. And do you want to?
Well, the tax abatements were part of the engine. That's the one thing that the public sector could offer, the developers and coming in. We'll give you 20-year tax abatement. This is all you have to pay. We won't raise. And then the issue came up, well, what are we getting for that? And we were able to make arrangements that some of that abatement went to the development of the Paul Robeson School, community school.
So there was dedicated monies from some of the payment in lieu of taxes went to the school?
That's correct. And then there was other projects. I think it really was the issue of reminding people that, this is not your money. I pay taxes. You'll come in and make decisions on money and land that you are not paying anything on. People say, well, our corporations pay, but you're not personally paying it. You're not putting the time in. You're not living here. You're not laying your head down. So that's always been one of my pet peeves. But hey, I'm not person.
So you were mentioning again this process moving along and some actions being taken. Any other sort of milestone efforts?
Well, yeah, I think we actually looking at the CBD, Central Business District, and making very definitive, projections about what we'd like to see. I think a lot of that, if you go back to the old plan, a lot of that has come to fruition.
And what you wanted to see, I can imagine what some of the things, what you wanted to see in the CBD.
Oh, the CBD, yeah, we wanted the cultural center. We kind of moved towards that, and we got some of the elements, and now we're talking about doing something even larger and more grander. We wanted a good, a significant presence of the governmental center, and so we got the 2 buildings, 3 buildings down there. We got the courthouse. So there was, if you look at the original plan, we're pretty close to it. Pretty close to it. The challenge becomes going beyond the CBD. What do you do when you cross? Yeah, we cross. That's crossing into crossing New Street. Where you have the senior housing, and you have Eric B. Chandler Center, and then how do you work that? Or going the other way, how do you go up Eastern Avenue? When you begin to look at the spines, I call them spines, or spokes coming into the wheel. At the what do you do along those corridors? How do you negotiate residential with retail and commercial? How do you make them coexist? How do you maintain a sense of neighborhood? That's the challenge.
So that we don't lose it, clearly the cultural center has been an important element.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you speak about that some?
Well, the cultural center brought people in, which helped and generate the kind of resources for the restaurants to do. When you look back on when we first started, people didn't stay downtown. People came in, went to work, and left. Now, it's hardly at night that you can't go down Livingston Avenue, that the street's not blocked off, or they have the valets out there taking cars. Well, people have to, when they go before, after, and performance, they end up going to eat. They're going to eat, they're going to drink. If they're here earlier, they go and shop. I think we moved away from it being a shopping center, with the development of the malls in the area, and people having access to transportation, to being more of a cultural and entertainment center, which is where we are right now.
If there aren't like some other projects with 20/20 hindsight, things that should have been done differently.
Wow. Well, I don't like to say if it coulda, can't. So it's an exercise. I don't know. I try not to do that. But I don't see it. It's a waste of energy. I'd rather look forward than I look back only for a frame of reference. To say I wish I could have when I didn't. It's a waste. I've always used that.
I guess one question I have, because you represented the community in many ways, and John Heldridge made a point of talking about the success of this redevelopment part of it was based on involving the community. So I'm wondering if you can, he talked about meetings that were held and discussions and all of that. Could you explain maybe a little bit more how, in addition to yourself, other members of the community were involved in the planning of the
initially Dave Nesbitt, which was the first president of Devco.
Okay.
And I set up meetings in various areas. I'm talking about subject areas or issue areas. We had it over at the Labor Center. And we organized people around economic development, we organized them around housing, we organized them around, people came out around those particular things. And then, we came up with, strategies and areas that we should move on, and those were presented to NBT. But it all came back to money. And it was a frustrating process because people keep looking at me saying, how did we get here, Roy? Why aren't some of these things taken care of? And some of them were beyond the control because we don't control the state and federal government.
Right.
Yes, you want low and moderate income housing, but who's going to subsidize it? Yes, you want better health care, but who's going to subsidize it? Have we improved in health? Yes, I think we have significant improvement in access, I would think, although people still feel that they don't have access. So there's a perception and there's a reality. Yes, we did do a lot of organizing. Yes, I put a lot of time in. Yes, I put a lot of my capital on the line. But then I said, well, what's your alternative? When everything is said and done, what can you do? And that seemed to kind of just, I guess, put people, at ease. Other things that people are gone. You're talking about 35 years. I'm talking about 43 years. So I watched people come and go, born and died. So, people have different perspectives. People now coming to New Brunswick and say, wow, this is really good. Have no idea what we went through to get it where it is today. But, I think what you're doing is admirable. I think it's necessary because people really don't know what was here. And the few people that do know, I know, are leaving us quickly.
One of the unique things that New Brunswick Tomorrow was doing was an annual survey. Can you tell us how that came about and your perspective on that survey?
Well, the annual survey was something that John and Annie Baglivo and others felt was a way of kind of testing the pulse of the community. I thought it went well. We had some problems, initially. And I think there's always a question of whether you're hitting the right people in the middle of the day, And I think the population has changed. People are not using landlines now. I don't know if it's as significant as it was, back when we started. I think you see, if you look at the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 surveys, is that we're kind of consistently in the 70s that they know that New Brunswick could monitor and that they agree that everything is fine. So it was a good, and it still is to some extent, a good barometer.
Would that then be used to almost like a marketing tool, saying, well, we should do more here and a little less there, or this is a concern that we should spend more resources on?
Well, we have attempted to do that with New Brunswick Tomorrow. We basically know what the issues are. We know that there's gangs. We know that there's immigration problems. We know that there's housing problems. We know that education needs to be improved. We know that health, access to health needs to be improved. I mean, those are issues which are, I guess, common to most urban areas. New Brunswick is not isolated. We're just a microcosm.
So I guess, what does the survey then give you? I mean,
gives me or gives others. I think, to me, I live this. I mean, I'm one of the few people on these boards that actually live it daily. So it doesn't tell me anything. Now, I think it misses the mark in relation to young people, because young people are not going to do the survey like older folks sitting at home.
So maybe it communicates to other people involved in this about who aren't so familiar with the issues. Is that?
I think it serves, educating this process is at many levels. So the survey serves a purpose for a certain group of people. Others that makes no difference to them. Maybe a pre and post test on academic achievement or self-awareness or self-esteem with youngsters may serve a better purpose for me, than that survey. Whether they learned something, being in our program, is more of a barometer for me. So I think, individuals come to the table with different needs, and so the survey serves a need.
How transferable do you think is what has been done in New Brunswick to other urban places? Like you mentioned size, but I mean, just maybe you can just opine on that.
Yeah, well, it depends on what you're talking about. We had a very interesting program where we had executives from various companies, including J&J, Merrill Lynch, and AT&T, come in and work a half a day in the schools. Had a tremendous effect on the schools. I mean, they came in, they worked as teacher assistants, they helped the teacher, they were role models.
And is that done through NBT?
No, that was a Civic League program. We did that in the 90s. We had over 550 volunteers come in over that 10-year period. It ended in 2000. In the middle, I was asked to see whether or not I could transfer it to another community. And it really came down to whether or not there was someone that had really the passion to make it happen and to have the resources to make it happen. So a lot of this depends on individuals. A lot of it depends on structure. I don't think that program, even though it was modeled after something that was happening in Washington, D.C., was transferable because I was looking at corporate personnel to get involved. And at that time, in the 90s, corporations were a little freer with their staff and, in fact, were more open to those kind of programs. When we hit 2000 and we had the crisis, the financial crisis, everybody was not only doing their job, but other folks' job. And so that program had to end. So it was a program at the right time, the right place, and it operated. If it had been expanded, it would have died someplace else too. So it depends on what you want to transfer.
But I guess, the dual entities of New Brunswick tomorrow and Devco, trying to realize you have to go beyond just the physical revitalization, and you have to have, the social and, quote unquote, the soft side. And I mean that.
I think it's all doable. It depends on the people who's sitting around the table. We were very fortunate to have people that really want to make it work. The other thing is that there were very little egos involved. It was very cooperative as people begin to get their things. When people start getting what they were in it for, then a second line group of people came in, and then it wasn't as strong because a lot of the actors who had the influence were not at the table. We don't have at the table NBT that we had at the table when we first started. And I would think the same thing with
the
Devco.
Principals from different organizations.
Right. Yeah. We had on Devco, we had like 3 or 4 banks sitting around the table, where we could come and say, well, we're going to have this project. Can you put up? I don't know where Devco has that right now. They also had people who were committed to New Brunswick. Bankers who established banks and were committed here to New Brunswick. Now we have regional banks. That's New Brunswick is like one of the marketplaces.
The community size, that a plus, you're a city of 40,000 rather than.
Oh, I think it is. I think my colleagues and I have looked at modeling, you know, and a little bit looked at, you know, what would Jersey City look like, looked at Trenton, you know, and each of them have some inhibiting factors. Trenton, of course, is, you know, just a governmental center. It doesn't have the kind of corporate base that is necessary. Elizabeth is much larger. When you start getting to the smaller communities, when you go to Bergen County, Morristown, I mean, then there's a whole different element that you have to deal with. So New Brunswick is very unique. I mean, it has to, you know, it's a university town. It's a county seat, and it has a major consumer product company who has fingers into other things like a big foundation, which helps, you know, support a lot of what we do here.
If I can ask, and that's it's related to some other work that I'm doing, we're trying to look, what are some good models to build schools, you know, especially in urban areas. You know, the tremendous need, very expensive, the existing monies are not there. I know New Brunswick has attempted, and you see the facts on the ground. Can you speak a little bit about that? The efforts made to build you know, some of the new schools in New Brunswick, and what we can learn from that.
Well, we have, if you go on Livingston Avenue, there's a big vacant lot,
Right.
which is called the site of the Redshaw Elementary School. Now, one of the issues in relation to the Department of Education, I'm not part of the Department of Education, is that they can't make up their mind how they want to deal with the Abbott versus Burke, or Burke versus Abbott, whatever, you know, the Abbott
Right,
district.
the Abbott districts.
And, you know, the most recent, of course, decision that there's no Abbott program, but they're Abbott kids, basically. You know, that you follow, the money follows the Abbott kids wherever they go. Well, that has hampered, to some extent, a lot of the planning for education in New Brunswick. The Paul Robeson School was closed because we were going to get an addition. We closed it. It stayed closed for 2 years until the board made a decision to take them back because we weren't going to get any play out of the state. At the same time, when that decision was made, as they were tearing down the Redshaw School, they realized we don't have enough money to build a school. But they tore down a perfectly good school, which then exacerbated sending those 900 kids to other schools. So when you start talking about schools, I mean, you know, we work in the schools. I mean, we're involved in at least 4 schools: the high school, the middle school, and 2 elementary schools. At one level, and then at another level, we're in all the schools in reference to the 7th and 8th grade. So, you know, my frustration, and you know, I was on the board of education for 9 years. My frustration is watching what we have to do each year and trying to put youngsters into a safe educational environment. Yes, we're getting ready to open that building over there is our new high school. That is costing the taxpayers.
That's what this is.
That's what it is.
Okay, we're trying to figure, and where is that located?
That's located right off of 27.
Oh, okay, near Jersey Avenue?
It's on Jersey. It's on 27. Jersey Avenue is we were trying to get it connected to Jersey Avenue just for access,
Right.
but we weren't able to do that. That's going to cost $183 million. It's going to be a state-of-the-art building. My concern is, are the kids prepared for the state-of-the-art building?
And whose building is that?
That's our new high school.
Right, but is
It's
Devco
built by the
involved
state.
in that?
Yeah, Devco's built it.
It's
Yeah,
built it,
right. We were very fortunate to have Devco. One of the things Devco does is come in on time. The school across the street up here, the Lord Sterling School,
Right.
was built
Right.
Devco. We're trying to get the state to consider Devco as a developer of the schools as we move forward, because they operate in a way in which they expedite things and things come in on time.
As opposed to what the school that just bidding it out
Right.
to
Yes, correct.
the school system.
Right. It's our last two schools that I was on the board when we did Fort Robeson, and that was a challenge. That was done by the state. But that was 20 years ago. 30 years ago.
Ironically, turns out my grandfather, whom I never met, he died before I was born, was an architect, lived right outside of Patterson, and built then, he designed model school buildings, which were then replicated. You know, you didn't have each district doing their own thing. If a school was good in Passaic, it was good in Patterson and elsewhere. There's still, I think, an elementary school that he designed in Passaic. But now districts, because I was on a school board for several years, each, it's a lengthy and expensive process. You bid out, you get all these architects coming in with umpteen plans, and everybody picks their own thing. Why do we all have to have, different looking buildings if you could do the same thing several times and it works well? It seems to me it would save some funds.
Well, you would have an architectural model that you can.
Yes.
And you would have a footprint to do that.
Sure.
But the curriculum changes.
Yes.
So what?
Definitely, I understand that.
So what your uncle did is, when you talk about small community
right.
Programs, that's why that looks the way it does.
Sure.
And that was designed 3, 4, 5 years ago. Yeah. And it's changed.
Right. Yeah, I realize like science labs and all that
Absolutely.
change
Yeah.
and technology.
So if I could just take us back to transferability, you've mentioned some of the both common and unique factors, county seat, presence of a major corporation, presence of a major university. Any other factors in terms of, we spoke about size?
Well, size, like I said, is I think, we all plan this. We know that there's a planning cycle. You have to be completely down and out for you to say we got to do something. You do something, you get to the point where everybody's satisfied, and then you kind of go back down again. I'm pleased to say that we have not reached that point where we're going down again. But it's our challenge to keep the enthusiasm up. And I think part of that is looking at new ways to expand what we've already done. To replicate, I think, depends on who and how desperate a community is. If everything is fine, no one comes to the table. They only come to the table when there's a common interest. And that's it gets to the point where a plant closes down and everybody says, "Wow, we're losing everything. We need to really do something different. We can't have a peanut shelling factory. We need to do something else.
Right.
We're not growing peanuts anymore."
Right.
Sasha, any further thoughts on sort of the future of the process now in New Brunswick? I mean, I guess you mentioned keeping the enthusiasm and energy up.
Yeah. Well, it's also looking for new opportunities. And we're basically redone the downtown, except for probably, I think my thinking is that they're going to do something to the fire deck. They're going to do a few other things. I don't know what's in the plan for George Street itself. I don't know whether it was always too expensive to do something there. But to look at the spines, what happens along George going out to Douglas with the new Gateway program. What would that do in relation to College Avenue? What do we do with Eastern Avenue going out? We can't do anything with Hamilton Street with J&J being there. So as you begin to look at spines, what do you do? And how do you negotiate with the neighborhoods to in fact be partners as you do that development? these are the people who pay the taxes in this town. You gotta remind people.
If I can just be an annoying professor, I'm wearing like a preservation hat. I guess one of the things you observe in New Brunswick redevelopment has been overwhelmingly new construction. The existing fabric was, largely demolished. Could that have been, was that just inevitable, or that was just the model at the time? Or?
I always think of that. You see that, I've got the commercial where the steamroller rolls over the world. It's all about interest. My interest has always been to preserve people, the incumbents who are here. If you don't live here, you don't have the same empathy that I have. And let's say they're bad. No, people are not bad. People operate in their interest. And I think that one of the things that we always have to remind people is that there are people here, and sooner or later, people are going to rise up, and they're not going to take to so much. So that's why you need to negotiate and bring them into the process.
And is that being done as far as?
I think it depends on what issue. I mean, no one's going to wake up to I'm lying, I'm sleeping there, or whatever. But I think as each issue comes up, it needs to be negotiated. No matter what you do.
Information for further research. We mentioned some of the people we're talking to. Were there some you can suggest that you really need to talk to X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, talk to Dave Harris.
Yeah, we have him on the list.
Okay. And Dave was here from the beginning. Dave has been a critic and supporter. Dave is one. I'm trying to think who's been around.
You mentioned a previous Devco president, Abdel. Is that Devco? Paul?
Oh, Paul Abdallah.
Abdallah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Paul, I think Paul's Stratton, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah, Paul was a good partner. We did a lot of neighborhood things. We did the parks, we did the basketball courts. He and Dick Mulligan were major pushers in relation to the schools, Kinley School. Yeah.
Is Mulligan still?
Mulligan left here and went out to Jackson Hole,
Oh, you mentioned that. That's right.
Wyoming, very suddenly.
Some neighborhood people or entities, pastors of church, people.
Been around.
We'd like to get a broader lens of people we're talking to.
Pastors that have been around, most of them did. To be quite very honest. Most of these folks have been here the last 10 years. Yes, Riddick has been here more. He's been here 20 years. Trying to think who was on the board. Do you have Jim Scott?
Jim Scott.
Jim Scott is on the board of MBT.
Okay.
Jim is a lifetime resident. Graduated from school. His kids are gone. He's still a resident here in New Brunswick. I guess he and I are the only. But Jim was also the executive director of the housing authority.
Oh, okay.
So he was back, a lot of the turmoil was going on.
Mm-hmm. What about the minister? Isn't there a Hispanic minister in one of the historic churches? The Reformed Church or whatever? No?
He hasn't been in.
Okay.
It's a damn church.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, he's in the last.
How about documents? I mentioned we've gone to the New Brunswick Library, we've gone to the Rutgers archives.
John Heldrick may, once he goes through them again, may give us some papers that he has in his office.
Yeah, I have. I'm gonna be honest. I have a lot of papers. I have a lot of clippings and everything.
Really?
Yeah, I'm using them myself.
Right.
In fact, I gotta find they're downstairs in the basement. I'm the only one allowed in the basement. No one wants to go there. Yeah, a lot of it's. Did you go into the archives of the Home News?
We have not.
Yeah, I think you need to do that. Because that's a lot of what I have. I don't know.
Right.
Some of that stuff I think it probably falls apart.
The New Brunswick Library, Public Library
Right.
has them too.
Right.
Yeah. I guess NBT must have files.
And T, we can see with Jeffrey should have.
Right.
Because they had a clipping service.
Oh, okay.
Talked to Andy Baglivo.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Andy has them things, he said.
Right.
In fact, yeah.
The person that was here before Andy was Bob Andrews, but Bob was with J&J. But Andy probably had with Bob.
Bob Andrews worked at J&J?
Yeah.
In marketing or PR?
He was
or?
PR person. He used to
Okay.
be on my board.
Okay.
And of course, trying to think who isn't left. This is.
You could always get back to us. Yeah, it's not.
Was Dick Nurse involved in any way from the university?
No.
No? He was on the Crossroads board.
Yeah, I know
think,
Dick
at
from the
some
Crossroads
Yeah.
board, and he's come to my EOD lunches, but
point. Mhm.
yeah. Back then, even some of the community people were involved. Yeah, Dave.
David Harris,
Dave
okay.
Harris. A lot of people have come and gone.
Yeah.
Come in.
That's why we're doing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, people moved in, did something, moved out, and moved
Right.
on. Yeah.
We have, well, we're trying to meet with Leo Molinaro, who was
Oh,
with...
Leo, yeah.
He's in a retirement community in Philadelphia.
Oh, you moved up to Philadelphia?
Right.
Okay.
And we have an interview, we have to set the date, but with Harry Cobb, who was the partner of IMP, who I guess did a lot of the work.
Oh, yeah,
IMP
right.
is apparently not able to do interviews anymore. So,
Yeah, I'm trying to think even in the medical area. Some of the deans, they moved on
Really
to.
good if
yeah.
anything comes
Yeah,
to.
okay.
Could the community have been involved more, or basically, given the nature of who was at that table, and you brought in a lot of, the community element.
Yeah, we had people that came on the board of NBT, but they just, I don't know, out of frustration and lack of interest, kind of just moved on. Unfortunately, I'm the only one that stayed on from the duration.
You're talking about community people now, or just people on the board in general?
No, I'm talking about some community people who are on the board, and some of the ministers are on the board. We had ministers on the board. They moved on.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
and if you want copies of any of these things, we're going to have them available, so...
Okay.
We'll send you the transcript of our discussion.
Right.
But as a larger resource, it's just available to you. All of these discussions.
Yeah, any of the other interviews we do
Okay.
at some point. We're not moving too quickly on the we have them transcribed technically, but we have to edit them
Right,
and
I realize
all of that.
Yeah. Well, sometime in October.
Okay.
Okay, well, I appreciate you.
Sure. Is there?
I'm sorry we didn't do it 2 years earlier.
We have
Sellars.
this very small pilot grant from the Fund for New Jersey looking at alternative ways to construct